So here at Stony Hill, up on the granite, there are a couple of good examples right in front of us of the family Proteaceae. That's one of the 4 big ones in southwestern Australia that are really rich in species. So we've got a banksia, which we'll hear more of shortly, but also right beside it is this plant, which is a hakea. Now, hakeas are related to grevilleas. They occur, the hakeas right across Australia, and this is a really important plant from a Noongar point of view and from a Western conservation point of view. From a Noongar point of view, firstly the seeds are edible, so these are the seed pods, and out of that split seed pod has come 1 or 2 seeds, and they're ground up into a sort of peanut paste and often mixed with kangaroo meat or fish to add extra nutrient, especially for growing kids. So edible material. But the local Noongars, particularly the Nap family in Albany, tell me that this plant is one that's been deliberately moved around by people and planted in a certain way. There's a form of animal husbandry here that we'll see more of at another place that's called lizard traps, or carda maya, carda for the goanna, the preferred food source. And they're flat slabs of granite, just like you see below us here, that are propped up by usually a fist-sized stone on one end, like that. And they create a shaded, sheltered space for reptiles to escape danger, to escape fire, cool on a hot day, that sort of thing. And the Noongars observed this generations ago and worked out that if they could get and manufacture slabs of rock of the right size, then they could add to the number of shelters on a rock, and therefore they would have a ready-made food supply as they're travelling across country. So a couple of ways of mining were invented, and this is one of them. This hakea is so tough, its wood is so tough, that when it matures into an adult this size, as you can see, its roots will push up a slab of rock. So you don't have to mine or anything, you just have to plant a seedling of this thing. I put some seeds down beside a potential slab of rock that you can't readily dig out or don't want to dig out, and you wait 20 years and you end up with a plant this size, and it's mined the rock for you. You can then pick up the rock and you've got the essential, one of the 2 essential elements of a carda maya or lizard trap. And here, after fire, this is 2 years after a fire in 2015, there is a seedling of this hakea growing right here. I'll show you an adult in a minute, but just notice that the seedling has a deeply divided juvenile leaf. So if you can zoom in close, you see it's almost fern-like as a seedling. So I'll walk around to show you a live adult. If you just follow me, you'll see a live adult of this hakea, Proteace. Here's a dead one, and dead side of the canopy, and the live side just here. You can see the profound difference in the adult leaves. They're like long needles, sharply pointed, so it's something you grab with trepidation when it's fully mature. Nothing like the juvenile. And the reason why it's important from a conservation point of view is this species is only known in the south coast of Western Australia on near coastal granite rocks. So it's a local endemic, we call it. But it was introduced into South Africa, and we don't know why, perhaps for dune stabilisation, and has become one of 3 or 4 species of hakeas that are now a major invasive weed in infertile sandstone-derived old landscapes over in South Africa. So while most of the weeds that come from old landscapes have come the other way from South Africa into Western Australia, this species is an example of reciprocal exchange. Now, what I thought I'd do is take you over to the banksia, because the banksia is the ultimate Proteaceae. This way. You see the skeleton again of a banksia. This is granite banksia, Banksia verticillata. a local endemic to the coastal outcrops of the Albany area, from Walpole to the west to many peaks to the east, and only found on these outcrops high in the landscape. It's killed by fire, and when that happens it takes roughly 2 decades for the plants to get big enough to flower sufficiently to start producing seed. So it's one you really need to keep fire away from for 2, 3, 4, 5 decades if at all possible, and that seems to be the natural fire cycle here. But it's also being killed by fungal diseases, both introduced dieback, Phytophthora, but canker, which is more problematic. It's an airborne fungus, unlike Phytophthora, which is born through the soil and distributed mostly by people, in fact, these days. The aerial-borne canker blows with the wind, and for a long time it was believed that this was another introduced deadly disease affecting this endangered species. But as mycologists got stuck into the canker itself, they discovered it was a new genus of native fungus. So it's a bit like the crown of thorns and the Great Barrier Reef. It's a native organism that occasionally explodes. Perhaps fire like this reduces the spores of the canker and keeps a lid on the population. We really don't know. But a completely new genus just described 5 or 10 years ago, probably less than 10 years ago, of native fungus that is also hitting critically endangered Banksia. So Banksia, Hakea, Grevillea, they're all members of the Proteaceae, Proteas from South Africa, of course, and that's one of the big four families in southwestern Australia, where extinction rates have been relatively subdued because they occur on old, climatically buffered and infertile landscapes, just like we're standing on right here in Toondirup National Park.